We need guardrails in our lives to keep us from accidentally straying off the road. We need guardrails in our ministry also, especially when it comes to items like counseling. I want to start with a shout out to a friend and colleague, Isaiah Leninger, who asked me to take on this topic. It's a really important topic, and I'm glad he identified that and gave me an opportunity to do this. You know, as ministers, we're often approached by people who are in life distress of one sort or another, and they want a word of comfort or advice. They want counseling, to use the broad term, counseling. Now that's interesting and it appeals to us greatly, but there are some things we need to acknowledge from the very beginning. So let's get some of these acknowledgments out of the way. The first acknowledgement that we have to make is it truly is seductive to our pride to be asked to provide advice and counseling. One of the reasons it's seductive to our pride is because, hey, we want to help. We want to be helpful. We want to be respected. We want to make a difference in people's lives. And certainly it is exciting to be validated in that way. But it is really, really dangerous. And it's dangerous to you, it's dangerous to your family, it's dangerous to the member, it's dangerous to the elders, it's dangerous to the church. There are a lot of dangers there. Now, that doesn't mean we shy away from that. We just need to be aware of the dangers, where they actually exist, and what we need to do to avoid wandering off the path and getting into trouble. There are some lines that must not be crossed. So, the first thing we acknowledge is that it is seductive to our pride. The second thing we need to acknowledge, this is just reality that exists out there, that is this. True psychological practice, true psychological counseling is the result of years of professional training, years of experience under supervision. You are not a mental health professional. And you must not fool yourself into thinking that you are a mental health professional. You are a biblical counselor. All we can do is give biblical advice. True mental health counseling is a very powerful and respected discipline in itself. We're going to get back to that in a moment also. So the first thing we acknowledge is that it's seductive to our pride to be asked. The second thing is that true psychological counseling is a difficult discipline in itself, and that's not us. The third thing we just have to acknowledge, this is reality, it's just the way it is, all right? The third thing that we have to acknowledge is that when it comes to setting boundaries, you set the boundaries and no one else. You don't allow other people to set the boundaries, particularly those who are asking for your help and advice. You set these boundaries prayerfully. You set the boundaries non-negotiably. They're not going to change. And you set these boundaries in advance, long before someone asks you to set those boundaries. You have to set the boundaries for your own ministerial counseling. Now, let's talk about the boundaries that need to be observed. First of all, let's talk about confidentiality. Confidentiality must be maintained, but there are some carve-outs to this, and the person needs to know where those carve-outs are before they get started. First of all, if there is abuse of minors or of the elderly, almost all states will require you to report that immediately. This is not negotiable and it's not optional. If abuse is happening, you need to report it. A second confidentiality carve-out that I would always explain before talking to anybody is if there is imminent danger to themselves or to someone else, confidentiality is off the table and it becomes an intervention at that point. But you must maintain confidentiality in this, and that's going to require two things from you. First of all, you're going to make notes about your meeting with this individual, and those notes need to be under two locks, and this will avoid any claim of ministry malpractice. And by the way, legally there is such a thing as ministry malpractice. So maintain notes under two locks. One lock would be the door of your office. Another lock would be the lock of the file cabinet or the file drawer where the notes may be kept. Under the two locks, you can't seriously be accused of malpractice in maintaining confidentiality. A second confidentiality carve-out that I want to make sure that you understand is you must never talk about this situation at home, around your spouse, around your children, not even so much as to mention that someone came in to see you. You don't want to identify a person that came in. You don't want to identify that they have a problem, not even to say someone came in to me because they're really distressed. You don't do that. Even to mention that will begin to breach the confidentiality that that person expects. So the first boundary that you set is confidentiality. But of course, that doesn't apply to abuse or danger. A second boundary that you need to set is in your own mind, and you need to explain this to the individual up front. You have a maximum of 3 one-hour sessions. That is all. 3 one-hour sessions is all you will meet with that person to try to resolve this problem. Why is that? A couple of reasons. First of all, if you can't resolve the problem biblically within 3 one-hour meetings, that means the problem's bigger than you. You don't have the ability to help with that particular problem, and you need to get that person referred to a specialist, a professional mental health counselor who can help that individual work through those situations. You yourself should always have a list of available Christian counselors who can help you with those situations. 3 sessions, and that will give you an opportunity to explore biblical principles with them and help them. If they can't be resolved within 3 sessions, they really need to see a professional. Here's another reason why you want to always honor 3 one-hour sessions. If you meet with such a person over a long term, you will discover that that person is very uncomfortable with you, that person will ultimately leave the church. They do that because they believe you are singling them out from the pulpit and talking about their problems over and over and over. When they hear you preach, they're only hearing anything that pertains to themselves, and they begin to resent you for doing that. That's why 3 sessions maximum, otherwise they need to see someone else. A third boundary is simply to observe best practices in these matters. For example, you never meet alone with a woman. You just don't do that, not ever. If possible, you include your spouse in this meeting. Otherwise, perhaps an elder that can help you with that. Even a trusted secretary can help you with that. Those people are not there to offer advice. They're not to participate in the counseling. They're only there to see what happens and to recognize that nothing untoward took place or inappropriate. So, never meet alone with a woman. Second, never mention your problems, your frustrations, your situation, or whatever. You don't even want to comment on their situation by giving them a similarity to something that you've experienced. It's not about you, it's about them. We need to keep it there and not engage in an interchange of problems or frustrations. You always want to make sure that your meeting is visible. That means meet in a room that has a big window in it so that people from the outside can see that there's a meeting taking place. You want to see that the door perhaps has a glass in it. If it's not possible, you're going to have to leave the door open because the meeting always needs to be visible to outside witnesses. They need to be able to look in and see that you're talking with someone. Always offer relevant scriptures that address the issue under discussion. And don't suggest a resolution to the issue under discussion, or else you will be responsible for all of the consequences of that decision as they are made. You offer the scriptural principles and help the individual to see what God says about these things, what the Holy Bible writes about those things. Finally, concerning that best practices, you always pray together. Pray for the situation, pray for the individual, pray for wisdom, pray for mercy, grace, God's care, but always pray together. And remember this, This may be a very serious problem that the individual is dealing with. That doesn't mean it's your problem to solve. We want to be taken seriously, we want to help, we want to make a difference. But ultimately, the only person who can solve that individual's problem is the person who's talking to you. Don't offer a solution unless you're willing to accept all of the consequences that follow from that. It's not necessarily your problem to solve. If you have other boundaries or other guidelines that you'd like to add to this, please enter them in the comments below. And as always, if I've said anything that you think may be helpful, please like, subscribe, and share this information with those who may benefit from it. Ministry really does matter. So, you want to set these boundaries in advance. You have boundaries about confidentiality. There is a maximum of 3 one-hour meetings, and you're going to follow best practices for the meeting when it takes place. That way, when someone comes to you and says to you, I've got a serious problem and I really need to talk to you about it, you can immediately outline those boundaries for them, especially concerning confidentiality and the necessity of dealing with abuse or danger. If you observe these guardrails, this will greatly reduce the danger of destroying lives and souls in your own family and your ministry through inappropriate conduct. Safeguard your ministry. It matters.